Good day, everyone. Welcome to another learning session from Training Location. We are an authorized DiSC distributor for Wiley Publishing, as well as a channel partner with the Ken Blanchard Companies. My name is Bill Harshman, and I'll be your presenter today. Please stick with me to the end of this short 13-minute video for a complimentary resource and one small request. Previously, we shared several aspects of the Everything DiSC. As we move forward, I've had the request to introduce specific applications and profiles using Everything DiSC as what I call the engine. There are several reports available, including workplace, agile EQ, productive conflict, work of leaders, management, and sales. Now, in previous lessons, we've covered workplace, agile EQ, and productive conflict. And today we'll dive deeper into Everything DiSC work of leaders profile, which helps leaders focus on understanding how their tendencies influence their effectiveness in specific leadership situations. So, what is leadership? Well, we don't have that much time in this short lesson. However, I want to share how Wiley defines it as it relates to the work of leaders profile. Leadership is a one-to-many relationship directed at moving a group or organization toward desired outcomes. What is the work of leadership? Research broadly supports the following three aspects of a leader's work. Generally includes creating a vision, building alignment around that vision, and champion execution of that vision. So, if there were only way we could accept our DiSC style and provide effective leadership, well, you figured it out. There is a tool that helps you do that, and that's what we're looking at today. Everything DiSC work of leaders. As you guessed, it uses Everything DiSC as its central core engine. However, unlike most DiSC profiles, which analyze the differences between people, work of leaders is focused just on understanding your tendencies and how they influence your effectiveness in specific leadership situations. My goal here is really just to increase your understanding of this profile using actual results from an actual assessment. How does leadership connect to the DiSC? Well, your DiSC style influences how you approach each of the three steps we mentioned: vision, alignment, and execution. And your DiSC style is going to tell you how much energy is going to be required to do the different aspects of each step. Now, the research validated work of leaders profile or application is intended for all leaders and is designed to help leaders understand their style, give leaders a framework for understanding leadership best practices, which I think is a real plus of this program, and provide tips and guidance for improving leadership effectiveness. Let's begin with a look at those 8 words that we see around the model and what they really mean. Those 8 words are what we call priorities. And you might remember this when we talked about the workplace profile. It had its own set of unique priorities. So these are similar, but they're unique to work of leaders. These priorities go with this profile. In other words, they're the primary areas where people focus their energy depending on their DiSC style. They're what I call the instinctive priorities where people, depending on your DiSC style, will focus their energy. Everyone has at least 3 priorities. Some have 4 and maybe 5, but having no more is no better or worse than having 3. But suffice to say, most people have 3. Now, your profile, your work leader's profile, is unique to you and based on your results. Priorities simply help us understand how our style might be reflected in real life work scenarios. The important thing to remember is that when things get foggy, such as when stress or uncertainty appear, we seek the priorities associated with our DiSC style. Today, we'll see what the work of leaders profile tells the participant and what action plan can result. Excuse me. Breaking it down further, we see the 3 priorities assigned to each quadrant respectively. And there is a little bit of overlap, as you'll see. A first look at the model shows the following priorities associated with the primary style. So D, or dominant quadrant, is resolute, commanding, and pioneering. The I, or influence quadrant, is pioneering, energizing, and affirming. The S, or steady quadrant, is affirming, inclusive, and humble. And the C, or conscientious quadrant, is humble, deliberate, and resolute. Now, this approach can at least already provide a high level understanding of priorities associated with each and all the 4 quadrants, even before we know the person's DiSC style. I always like to consider the basic styles before we dive deeper. Let's suppose we have a participant whose name is Michael, and initial review of his workplace profile indicates that he's in the D style quadrant. Now, we know from a previous lesson that Michael has an outward activity level, I like to call that pace, described as fast paced or outspoken. We also see that he has an agreeableness quotient described as questioning and skeptical. When we combine these two dimensions, we know that Michael's traits as a dominant style include, and you see them listed there, direct, firm, strong willed, forceful, and results oriented. And I'm going to combine these and compile these in just a moment. So on our next slide, the profile we're about to look at will show us a lot more. So let's take a look at that. Priorities are where Michael focuses his energy. For example, as we uncover more info about Michael, we see that his D style has the following three priorities of resolute, commanding, and pioneering. You can see in the slide there. These priorities are the lenses through which Michael views various situations and interactions, and they shape his leadership experience. So now we have not only identified his D-styled traits from the previous slide, but we also know his priorities. Let's see what we know so far about Michael in kind of one picture. Behavioral dimensions of fast pace and outspoken, as well as questioning and skeptical. Traits of the dominant style, including direct, firm, strong willed, forceful, and results oriented, and work a leader's priorities, including resolute, commanding, and pioneering. So let's see what the work of leaders profile tells Michael about this information and, again, what action plan can result. All the profiles begin with a very good summary of DiSC and what the four quadrants mean in terms of DiSC style. So if you do have somebody that you're going to implement this with in your work, you don't need them to have a base understanding of DiSC before they take this assessment. Then the profile provides several paragraphs of helpful information and context unique to, in this case, Michael's D style, to help him understand the unique nuances in his personal work of leaders profile report. Then the report provides a detailed summary of each of Michael's three priorities. Now, in the interest of time, I'm choosing one to share as an excerpt for your understanding. Being commanding is one of Michael's. Michael, leaders with your D style feel a strong sense of responsibility to get results, and you expect others to share your focus on achievement. At times, your confident and driven style may cause you to come across as somewhat demanding, and it continues and goes on. Excuse me. Then his report continues with explanation of his pioneering and resolute priorities, respectively. Then we're introduced to the work of leaders process. And we said there are three steps: vision, alignment, and execution, with each of which have three drivers, and each of those drivers have two behavioral continua. So here's a graphic of just the crafting a vision process step. As you see, three drivers for vision are exploration, boldness, and testing assumptions. And again, with two behavioral continua under each driver. That's kind of challenging to say that. So we see those. All right, let's move on. Now, staying with our vision excerpt, we begin examination of this process step with a definition. Vision, according to Wiley, is an imagined future condition for the organization or team. Now, this section of the profile includes a full page on examples important in context of the vision. Clearly, we're not going to read that now, but I just want to show you the amount of information provided to the participant. Now we begin to dive into the first driver, again, just staying on the vision, first driver of exploration, including its two behavioral criteria. Now, a deeper, broader explanation is provided on how exploration drives vision and remaining open and prioritizing the big picture. This is where Michael's individual results are charted along these two scales. Notice Michael's rating dots on the two continua. In the context of exploration, the behaviors on the right-hand side of these scales are leadership best practices. Like I said earlier, there's some really good information in this report. Any movement toward the right will help when exploring a vision. Similar displays are, as you can imagine, are made for the remaining two drivers of boldness and testing assumptions with their respective behavioral continua. And the report continues for the remaining two process steps, coming back to a higher level of alignment and execution. So we end up getting through all three of the process steps. Playing to your strengths is an important starting point for improving your leadership effectiveness. Now, this section begins to identify Michael's three strongest areas in the processes of vision, alignment, and execution. For example, Michael's strongest area in the vision process step was the driver boldness, with the behavioral continua of being adventurous. Michael's other two leadership strengths happened to both be in the execution process. So, what I'm telling you is you're not necessarily going to get a strength from each one and all three of the higher level steps, process steps. Knowing your greatest opportunities for improvement is key to completing the picture of effectiveness. This section begins to identify Michael's three, again, behavioral continua that they feel need attention. For example, Michael's first area of improvement was execution, which leads to feedback and offering praise. Since Michael sees himself as less open with praise, perhaps spending more time giving positive feedback and making people feel appreciated is what he needs. Each summary includes tips for improvement, and how can you adapt your behavior to become a better leader? His other two areas of opportunity happen to both be in alignment, and they were being receptive and being encouraging. I hope this overview increased your awareness, knowledge, and familiarity of the work of leaders profile. And whether your needs are employee engagement or conflict management, team building, or just simply communication, DiSC is the research-based proven leading training solution. It's impacted more than 8 million learners in over 130,000 organizations and through 14 languages in over 70 countries worldwide. I want you to remember a couple things. DiSC is a quick, intuitive way to understand yourself and the needs and priorities of others. And DiSC delivers immediate and lasting impact on the performance of your people and the culture of your organization. And as always, the key to effectiveness through DiSC is understanding your and others' styles, then using that knowledge for improved interactions. Here's our contact info. And before you go, I want to extend you a resource and a request. I'll be happy to send you a sample PDF of the Work of Leaders profile or any other profile you request for that matter. Or if you'd like to discuss a complimentary live webinar introducing DiSC or a particular profile to your team or organization, shoot me an email to info@traininglocation.com. Next week, we'll be introducing the Everything DiSC Management Profile, which helps managers understand how they approach their work. Be sure and check out our learning blog, traininglocation.com, and click on blogs. And before you close out your screening, we always appreciate your like or your share or download. And of course, for continued learning, please subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. Thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye till next time.